I'm here today with Helen Sanderson. Hello, Helen.
Hi, nice to be here.
Nice to meet you. Helen is a psychotherapist, an interior designer, and a clutter expert. So I've asked her to come on today to talk to us about clutter. She's also an author of The Secret Life of Clutter, which has been described as a love letter to clarity, which I absolutely love. We all need a bit of clarity, don't we? So obviously, as a psychotherapist, you must have a real interest in what clutter denotes for people. How on earth do we bring out what's inside our heads into our environment? What does it show when somebody is cluttered?
Well, it shows a lot. And we don't do it deliberately. Quite often it's an unconscious process. And I suppose what my book is of a series of stories. And on that basis, I think that your house and your clutter has a story to tell. And that's really the premise of which I'm working from. And I've really worked with a lot of people over the years, and there's little things that just appear and sort of stories that kind of come out, and it's really very touching. And there is a lot of shame related to clutter, and a lot of people feel ashamed and very protective of their things. That is a symbol of how much we identify with our stuff. It becomes an extension of ourselves in a way. So it is quite profound and a very emotionally sensitive topic, which is why I'd say to people, be compassionate to yourself.
I think by the time we get to midlife, we've lived a life and we've collected an awful lot of things, haven't we? Is it a case of not wanting to let go, do you think, with people? Not wanting to let go of memories? What does clutter denote to people?
Yeah, because we use objects as kind of anchoring. So we anchor memories in objects. So sometimes if you've had really special memories, you want to keep the object that relates to it. But then if you kind of anchor lots of memories into lots of things, you can become very cluttered. So it's, can you keep your special memories intact, have lots of things around you that are meaningful, but also be discerning about, do I use this? Is it useful? I always say to people, the less stuff you have, the less stuff you have to manage. It takes a lot of management, a lot of all of these special memories all around the house.
Yeah.
So,
And not just with dusting, psychologically as
exactly.
well. It's about the dusting,
Absolutely.
isn't it?
Yeah. And the storage space. So your shoes pay rent, sort of thing.
Mine ought to.
I had somebody, a really lovely guy, say to me in this shop once, we were laughing about women and shoes and handbags. And he said, well, it's the same for men in their tool shed. So tools for men are what bags are for women. And we all have our little sort of fetishes, if you like. And so quite often people will say to me, well, my husband doesn't really understand, just get a skip. And yet he probably wouldn't like us saying that about his tool shed.
Yeah, yeah.
So
with me, it's books. I'd like to be surrounded by my books. And when we first moved into this house, we didn't put the bookshelves up, and it took us years to sort out the bookshelves, and then all my books came out the loft. And I remember sort of putting them all on the bookshelves and standing back and going, oh, my husband said, I didn't realize how much it meant to you to have your books out.
And it's almost like a part of you was detached from yourself and being neglected and put in the loft. Yes. And so when you get reunited with something as meaningful, because it's part of our identity, a lot of our stuff is a part of our identity. And if books are important to you and it's a way that you nourish yourself, I'm terrible with books. I buy books. I love books. But, I always remember once somebody saying, we read to know we're not alone. And I think there is a companionship that comes in reading a book. There is an experience, and it's a journey that you have with the author. And lots of people have written to me and said that they've had a very meaningful experience reading my book. So there is something about books that there is a relationship that you have with your reader.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I've never thought of it like that. For me, it's what they represent, I suppose. It's the knowledge and the entertainment and everything that I've got out of those books. And I remember reading once about because I made a deal with my husband that if I bought more books, that it was like one in, one out. Which I have bought another bookcase since, but and I put doors on some of them as well, so they're not all, because they look so messy, and I think he finds that quite difficult to deal with. But I remember reading about somebody saying that if you're going to get rid of the old ideas to bring in new ideas, it's just that fresh energy coming through the door. But there are certain books I just would never ever let go of. They're just I look at them and I don't want to read it again, but I remember reading it, and so
that's the anchoring into an experience that I was talking about, that the book reminds you of that experience that you had of reading it that was nourishing and nurturing to you. And therefore, when you see the book, you get to re-experience that. But there's also a downside of that, in that quite often when I work with people, there'll be bits that they don't want to find scattered around the house. So that one of the kind of avoidances, if you like, of actually I don't really want to declutter or go through my stuff, is because I don't want to find the things that I've hidden from myself. Because the power of an object to take you back to a memory, and sometimes those memories are not good memories, and sometimes those objects need to be let go of because of what they hold and what they represent. So it takes a lot of courage, I think, to sort of go through all of your stuff and do a purge and find some of those scary objects as much as the lovely ones.
Yeah, it's facing unhappy memories, isn't it, that you might push down, and then they represent that. It's really, I find that I'm always tidying up because I have so much in my head. I have a head full of magic all the time, but there's so much in there I have to have, where you can see around me where I sit and write, it's white, and there's very little here. Because there's so much in here, I can't, if my eyes are alighting on lots of different things, it distracts me from what's in my head. But I wouldn't say that it drives me mad. It drives me mad that things can get untidy so quickly. Is the answer to that to just have less things?
Well, so I talk about, and in my book I talk about the idea of the garden metaphor, I call it. And if you've ever known somebody that says to you, oh, I wouldn't want a garden because it's too much work. And we always know that gardens take a lot of work, don't we? But for some reason, we don't realize that houses take a lot of work too. And so I say that there are 3 steps. First step is to do the weeding, and that is clearing out all the weeds. So all of those things perhaps that do provoke the memories that are painful, or things that we don't use, or it's about having a little bit of a reality check with yourself and doing a bit of a cleanse and a purge. So that's the weeding, and it's the decision-making process. And clutter is decisions that haven't been made. So that's the weeding stage. Then the next part is the planting. Everything has a place for everything. So you've got homes for things. And if you know where to find the sellotape, you don't need to keep buying a new sellotape.
Yes.
And often people have said, oh, and we've gone, oh, look, how many sellotapes do you need? Or how many moisturizers or whatever? And well, I couldn't find it, so I had to buy another one. So that's really classic. So if everything's got a home and a place, then it's easy to find, easy to put things away, and easy to maintain. So that's the last part, is the maintenance. And yes, it's not perhaps growing as fast and as prolifically as a garden is, but your home is still a living, breathing space. And so you do need to keep tidying up. That is true. And so quite often I end up talking about chores, doing your chores, creating that space, exactly as you say, that clear space that's got so less visual noise, so that we can then have a relationship with our inner being without seeing the clutter and the nag going, oh, you really should sort that out, or you really should tidy that up, and which is very draining.
So what's the way to tackle that then? Is it sort of to have a daily routine where you sort of look around the room and tidy up every day? Or is it best is it to do with your personality, whether you're better to just have a day a month or do it daily?
Well, it depends whether or not we're talking about the decluttering weeding process, which is the cull, getting things out, or whether or not we're talking about the daily maintenance.
I was thinking of daily maintenance.
Yeah.
You just mentioned that. So
Yeah.
keeping on top of things.
Yeah. So obviously you have less. The less stuff you have, the less stuff you have to manage. And just to have routines, like, do you get up in the morning and make your bed? Because if you do, then it's a nice thing to come home to, isn't it? It's a nice thing to whereas if you walk in your bedroom and the bed's unmade, it's got this kind of scruffy, unfinished feeling, and then it's difficult to complete other things. And I run an online course. I talk to my participants and I say, look, I actually like going into the kitchen and cleaning up at the end. It's sort of put the radio on, I shut the door, I make a noise, and it's sort of so that's like the chore. And I accept that's what's going to happen in my day if I want to come home to a clear space in the morning. And also equally, you can apply the same to your desk, can't you? If you're coming into an untidy desk each morning, you're dealing with yesterday's stuff before you've even got started with today's energy. So I talk a lot about living with clutter is like living in debt, always kind of dealing with yesterday's stuff. So if you can clear the debt, then you can live in the present and just deal with the top level, which is chop wood, carry water, isn't it? Do the washing up, do the laundry.
Yeah. I remember my grandmother said to me when I had my first baby, and I was struggling because, when you have your first baby, you go, what the heck? What's going on? And she said, always make your bed. She said, get out of the bed, make your bed. She said, just make time for that. And then if you do nothing else all day, at least you've got a calm space to go back to at the end of the day.
That's so nice.
Always remembered that.
Yeah. And what great advice.
Yes. Well, I've said to my husband before, if ever you go into the bedroom and I was the last out of the bed and I haven't made it, I'm not coping well that day. It's a sign that I'm not 100% as I should be. So take note. Don't think he ever has, but he's been given the heads up. There you go. So making the bed is very important to me. So when it comes to actually doing the weeding, anybody listening now sitting in clutter, wanting to change that, what's the first step?
Well, there's kind of two first steps in a way. One is when I work with people, I always start with why. Why are we in a muddle? Why are you not coping? Why is it like this? Or why have you got so much stuff? And we delve a bit deeper into the why. And that is where the kind of really juicy, interesting stuff appears. And in my book, I talk about, there's several stories and we talk about the why there. And then the other aspect is if you can't get to the why, because usually you need a kind of deep conversation to do that, it's really starting with setting goals and vision. Where do you want to be with your home? Do you want to live with it like this, or do you want visualizing? Because I think any journey that you go on, if you don't know where you're going, you're going to kind of drift and get a bit lost. So if you get clear about, actually, I want to reduce my stuff by 25% or 50% or whatever it is. And I want to do that because I don't want to live a consumerist lifestyle anymore. And I want to just live with simple. I've worked with people at midlife who retired and said, we just want to simplify our life. We've had a big, full life. And as we're getting older, we don't want to have so much to manage. And that's a clear goal, simplifying my life. And then it's really clear when you're making the decisions, that's the objective that you're trying to meet, even though sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes the decisions are hard.
So it's having like that towards motivation. Rather than it's not just, I don't want to live in a mess. It has to be, I want to live in a clear space because that's what gives you the impetus to start and then continue. So can you give us an example of a story that somebody might have hoarding or having clutter? I suppose hoarding is another level of clutter, isn't it?
There's a story in my book about a lady whose mum was living with her, and there was a lot of sentimental things around the house, and she'd kind of given up a lot of herself and her life to look after her mum, and kind of felt very in service to that. And there's some really lovely moments. One of them was this little bird that was in a cage in her display cabinet that we kind of just sort of It's funny how you just get drawn to something. Like sometimes I'll say to someone, oh, what's that? And then there'll be this kind of story that appears. And yeah, so the bird kind of represented a little bit about how trapped she felt in this situation with her mum. And then lots of energy shifted and things changed. She's now actually living in another country and is kind of liberated and free, and her mum's in a good place. So it's usually people come when they're ready to make a change, or a change is needing to happen. They don't really know. And so we just start with the mundane and the practical and the things that you can change. Sometimes if there's been trauma or distress or a broken up marriage or a bereavement or something, the emotional side of it can take a bit longer. It's a sort of a slower process, but you can still deal with the practical. And it's a place where you can often feel exactly like your mum said, where you can take some agency, like I'll make the bed in the morning, and that will be a way of supporting myself. So by dealing with some of the stuff that I've got around my house, it's a small little steps that I can take to making a shift in the right direction, even if I don't know how those big steps are going to happen.
So by decluttering your things, it allows new energy to come in and
Absolutely.
to move forward.
Absolutely. I mean, and empty thy cup, they say, so that it can be filled. So, and often we're all so full wardrobes. People phone me up and they say, I can't put things away because the cupboards are full. and things jump out at me when I open the cupboard, and it's like, oh, I don't want to open the cupboard. And then my diary's full. And so I think we're all very full, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, is your wardrobe a good place to start? If you're just going to start somewhere, is it the thing that irritates you the most, or is there a space that you would always say start there to get going?
So I would say, depending on where you're stuck. So if you're somebody who's stuck in the weeding phase, which is making decisions to let things go, I would say start with something that's easy to let go of. So I wouldn't say to you, start with your books, because you clearly attached to your books.
Yes.
So maybe you want to go through the kitchen and see what you've got duplicates of, and see that fondue set that you were given for your wedding that you've never used, and just looking for that. Or maybe you've got a juicer and you don't do juicing anymore, and you don't actually, now the things have changed and we realize that maybe juicing isn't so good. So start with something that is kind of easier, and that will give you a sense of flow and, I can do this. And we always say, leave the difficult stuff till the end. If you're somebody that struggles with planting, then maybe you want to get a friend who's really good at placing things or finding homes for things, because I think that not everybody has a good spatial brain. I've obviously got a really good spatial brain, but I haven't got a very good brain for numbers. So then I would get an accountant to help me. So if you're not a spatially orientated person, then maybe you can get somebody, and there's lots of people that love creating order. If it's maintaining, choose one area. So like your mum suggested the bedroom. I like to have the kitchen clear. It makes me feel good to come down to a clear kitchen in the morning. So find something, start off there where you feel that you can get some success.
I think that would be my husband. He always likes to come down to a clear kitchen. So if it's my turn to clear up and I haven't, he's very upset if he comes down and I haven't.
Yeah.
I'm very good at closing I had 4 small children, and I kind of learned not to see mess, because otherwise I was constantly clearing up or constantly nagging them to clear up. And I learned not to see it. But as I've got older, it's bothered me more. I've got grandchildren now, and I've still got toys everywhere. So I have places where I can gather them all up when they've gone and put it all away. I'll get them to help me gather it all up. But I think that as we get older, our priorities change as well, don't they? And as you say, we've led full lives. Yeah, definitely something that's worth doing. I know I feel much clearer headed and much more able to cope with life and what life throws at me if I have order around me. Do you ever have situations where you're going into a home and you've got a couple or people living together and they're complete opposites when it comes to, one might be very happy living with clutter, one needs order? How do you deal with that?
I have a lot of people phoning me up telling me that their partner is driving them nuts and can I do something? And actually, really the person with the clutter has to be on board with it. I'm not into going in and working in a space. Very much my policy is to work with the person and they make the decisions. I can't make decisions about other people's things. And even if I see something that I think is, well, that's a rusty box of something, it could be a childhood memory to them. It is often quite a very common source of conflict. And of course, opposites attract. So maybe the person who really values and treasures order and peace and harmony marries somebody who's chaotic, or the other way around. And then it's really a conversation that needs to be had. But recently, even this week, I had somebody saying to me, my husband is clutter blind. So what do I do? And I was saying, well, it's a bit like trying to get somebody who's tone deaf to hear a tone. They don't see it. And then you need to have at least one area of the house that you're in control of, your domain, that you can escape to, that gives you, because especially creative people or certain types of people really need that sense of order and calm around them to de-stress. So being in a cluttered environment is like coming home to a place that's really draining your energy.
Can it have health implications if somebody's living in an environment that stresses them like that, would you say?
I think that there's a cycle of often people are depressed and then they become cluttered and then they get depressed about the clutter and then they can't do anything because they're depressed, and then that becomes a sort of a cycle. But yes, that definitely, because sometimes if you've got too much clutter and you can't get in and fix the heating, or you can't get clear energy, fresh air coming in, then mold can be, and dust, and all of those things can have an impact on your health. But then you get to the extreme ends where people are hoarding, then there's danger of things, fire and things falling over, and it gets quite serious. Then it becomes an environmental issue.
Is it a psychological issue, hoarding?
Yeah.
Absolutely. A condition.
Yeah.
Right, well, I'm going to go off now and I'm going to see what I can tidy up. I think it's a case, isn't it, of a little bit of clutter you can live with. It's when it gets out of hand and you get overwhelmed by it, and then it becomes a problem. And to have a profession where you're helping people to declutter, it's an unusual job, isn't it?
It's an unusual job, but it's a great job. It's a great job because you and I was talking to someone recently about the difference between interior design and decluttering, is that if I'm doing a design project, I'm kind of using plans and elevations, and some people can't read that, they can't interpret that very well. And then you have to kind of sell it. You have to say, look, it's going to look really lovely, just trust me. And but I don't like trusting people. Why should I trust you? But if you're in someone's space and you say, look, if we move the sofa over here and put the table over there, or it could really make this room flow better, or it could give you a working zone, and they go, oh, I don't know, I like it like this. And then you say, well, look, can you just trust me for a minute? And if you don't like it, I'll move it back. So within like a conversation in 20 minutes, you can change somebody's relationship with their space. And I've had somebody say, that's never going to work. And I said, well, can you please just let me show you? And then I remember the moment that they sat down and just went, oh, I absolutely love it. So, and that's the thing about being able to read space, and that's my gift, if you like, and that's what people are getting when they're working with me. And it's a great job, because often people are feeling very ashamed and down on themselves, and they feel like they should be able to do it, and why can't they do it? And so there's a lot of self-criticism and self-berating going on. And usually it's because there's some emotional thing that they don't want to go through, or they're trying to get around. And sometimes you just need support to go through that emotional thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's really interesting. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that will find that interesting as well. How your space affects your well-being, particularly now in these post-COVID times. There's an awful lot of working from home, and our space has become even more important, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll put the links to your book and to your website in the podcast notes, and people can have a look and see what it is that you do.
Great.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.